Ahoy there! So we got something special for you guys today. We're in the middle of our road trip here on the mainland, and as you can see behind me, we made it with the bus all the way down from Homer over to Seward, Alaska, then kind of back to the freeway. We made it over Turnagain Pass, got some beautiful footage. Now, today we're gonna have an extra special treat because we're gonna be reviewing one of my dream cars, and actually a dream car that I helped a buddy of mine find. Check it out. Oh yeah. The one, the only, 1982 Chevrolet Corvette. Let's take a look. Look at that. Now, many say that the C3 Corvette is one of the less desirable ones, and of the less desirable ones, they say that the 1982 is the least of the undesirable ones. Now, I tend to disagree. Yes, this body style came out a lot earlier, and this was the last of the production run. And, okay, so maybe there's a couple of spare parts that were put into these, and maybe the fiberglass is a little thinner. But, to me, it was the end of an era. This is when what looked fast became less popular, and what actually was fast and handled and was a slave to the wind tunnel is what sold. Okay, now what's the most beautiful part about this car? Probably originality, which is complete in almost every detail, and the fact that it's only got 17,000 original miles. This thing's barely seen rain. So, quick review of the dash. As you can see, normal headlight switch. Pretty basic on the gauges. You got speedometer, tachometer for all 200 horsepower that you're going to unleash out of this beast. Then in the center stack, you've got temperature, gas or fuel level, your oil temperature, oil pressure, and voltage. And then this does have an aftermarket radio. It's one of the few modern touches this does have. Now this also has power windows, and being a 1982, it's an automatic because the automatic was the only transmission available. Now, one thing that's kind of interesting, if you look here where the key goes, see that? It's got a key lock. Now, this key lock was required so that when you're driving your manual transmission vehicle, you didn't get all crossed up. The only thing is, this being an automatic, it doesn't really need the key lock, but again, little parts bin technology was going on, so there you go. Now, look at the condition of this dashboard. This looks like the day it rolled off the factory. Now, a lot of people say that the quality of these Corvettes was lacking. I beg to differ. Now, this even has a cigarette lighter, which was obviously used because, let's face it, this car's from the 80s, and that's how things rolled. Got a power door lock switch that you could see on a Cadillac, a Pontiac, or a Corvette. Like I said, a little bit of parts bin technology. Even the switch, even the door lock itself, the little plastic lever, is down here. But if this was any other GM car, it would be right here. Now, taking a look under the hood, typical, sports car style. Besides having pop-up headlights, of course, the hood has to open backwards. Now, for those of you who are mechanics, like I used to be, this is kind of a mixed bag. Now, it's got the patented Corvette slanted radiator, which is always kind of neat because they fit it in the low nose. However, one thing that's less than ideal is because the fenders stay here, you don't really benefit as much from the front end going forward as you would if it was a clip. Now, for those of you who might think that a Corvette, low performance, 1982, only having 200 horsepower, okay, that's true. Basically, it's a regular 350 V8, 5.7 liter. It's got two throttle bodies instead of one. Most of the GM vehicles of this age had one throttle body in the middle. This has two, which does tend to create a little bit of excitement when people are trying to tune them up because it's got pretty much duplicate of every sensor, and that can throw things out of balance. Then a standard HEI ignition, which is high energy ignition. Now, one thing this Corvette does have that a lot of people don't know, it actually has ram air. See this opening here in the air cleaner? So the air comes through here via this door here that pops open when the car is going fast enough. So it does have ram air, believe it or not. And it's not just a gimmick, it actually works. Matter of fact, it's so neat, pretty much most people don't even know it's there. Now, like most C3 Corvettes, The battery is actually behind the seat on the interior of the cabin. Great idea with these Corvettes is to go with a sealed battery, because the sealed battery won't vent gases and you won't have a corrosion problem in the bird cage, which is kind of what they call the cabin of these things. Now again, being 1982, well, they didn't quite have emissions figured out yet. And this actually still has its smog pump, which almost all of these were removed. This smog pump is basically nothing more than an air compressor that pumps air into the engine so that it basically cuts down on the particulates of how many parts per million or whatever of the exhaust gases and particulates that you have going out the exhausts. Now, the funny thing is, of course, by adding more air, you haven't removed anything. You've just added more air. Operating the hood, pretty simple. Of course, it's fiberglass. Put it up, just give it a light tug. Again, being fiberglass, it's so light, easy to open and close. Close it, pull this, bring it on down, and hood's closed. All right, so now here's the best part. You know why? Buddy Russ gave me the keys. Let's take this thing for a ride.
Hey, how do I open this? Wow, that's weird. Yeah.
All right. Look at that, 54 years old, I can still get in a Corvette. All right. Now listen to the door on this. Now granted, again, 17,500 miles, but listen. Wow. So again, with the crossfire injection, the standard General Motors key, General Motors cylinder lock, everything's pretty normal. Just go ahead and start it like a normal car. Look in the back there, I don't know if you can hear that grinding noise. That's the power antenna going up. Yep, that's right, the power antenna still works. Power windows still work. Obviously, it's got the glass T-tops in there, and because this is such a beautiful car, I don't even dare take the glass T-tops out. Now, as you can see here, we're waiting for it to warm up a little bit. We've got our oil temperature, our oil pressure, the voltage, which is right where it needs to be, just between 13 and whatever that color is up there. We're full of fuel, which is awesome. Of course, the car is 17,000 miles, hasn't gone through a lot of fuel. And again, our water temperature. Old school craftsmanship for how they did it back then. We got our power window controls here, and our power mirror controls right here. And if you look up on the dashboard, you can see, or past the dashboard, you can see when I put the headlights up. That's how you know it's the 80s, baby. Down they go.
Hey, notice like giving your wife to another man.
I do. And she's going to be ruined for you when I give her back. Hard to believe a big dude like me at 6'3" fits in this thing. But I do. And matter of fact, now this car is not encumbered by modern safety features. No airbags, no anti-lock brakes, no traction control, but with 200 horsepower, maybe you don't need traction control. And the best part, your arm fits perfectly right here. Now, because we're driving on gravel, I'm taking it easy. And quite frankly, since this is my buddy's car, and this might be one of the nicest and I don't think I'm exaggerating, this might be one of the nicest 1982 Corvettes in the country, with only 17,500 miles. The ones in the Corvette Museum, the Corvette Museum had that sinkhole, so that probably affected things. So let's go. So it's not a speed demon, and it's a little noisy in the back, but I gotta tell you, it's a beautiful car. Hopefully you can hear me over the road noise, actually. But the thing about the Corvette, it's smooth. This doesn't feel like a sports car. I mean, it does, because we're sitting at the back wheels, and we've got a hood that is just massive ahead of us. But if you want to go ahead and take a look at the view out the hood there, now this has standard. This is one of the last Corvettes, I think this is the last Corvette actually, that had standard steering. Now standard steering means inner and outer tie rods, a pitman arm coming off a worm gear steering box, and then an idler arm on the other side of the frame to to balance out whatever the pitman arm does. So, was it high tech? No. Did it have good road feel? Not really. Is it low maintenance? No. So, is rack and pinion steering better? I'll admit it, rack and pinion steering is better. Rack and pinion steering might be better, but still, I mean, just to drive this piece of history, I gotta be honest, I'm a little nervous right now. I mean, I've been driving forever, but I'm less nervous driving the 17-ton bus than I am driving this. Again, because this car is just not replaceable. Now, again, like I said earlier, 1982 C3 Corvette, probably considered by collectors to be one of the least desirable. Now, in 1983, Chevrolet didn't even make a Corvette because, quite frankly, well, word around the campfire is they weren't entirely certain that this whole Corvette thing was going to work out. These cars cost a lot to make, and it took a lot of labor to build this body. The C4 Corvette was already in development, and the 1984 Corvette, which is the C4 next generation, now that had a lot more modern safety features, but more importantly, it had the handling that this really doesn't have. You know, it had rack and pinion steering, was lower, had wider tires, had those Goodyear Gators, or Gator backs that were so popular back then. They were definitely a better car, but I gotta tell you, this one is incredible. The cool part about this car, even though it was built in 1982, I gotta tell you, this thing knows how to take a roundabout. They didn't really have the roundabouts back in 1982. Now, again, it's not lightning handling, but boy, this is a nice driving car. You know, the fun part about this car, being only 200 horsepower, which, let's face it, it's less horsepower than just about everything now. I mean, for all a Honda Civic has more horsepower than this does, but yet this big V8 still has some nice torque, fun to drive, and the thing is, you can use a lot more of this car. You know, now the modern Corvette, you know, now it's a mid-engine. You know, the Corvettes originally were like this one with the engine and transmission in the front, independent suspension in the back. Later on, they moved to the engine in the front and the transaxle in the back, with a cardan shaft in between. Now they've moved the engine and the transmission to the back. They still have a 5.7-liter engine, 350 cubic inches, but they've got an insane amount of power, probably 3 times the power this car has, if not more. And the thing is, you can only use 10% of that car at any given time. This car, you can use a solid 50 or 60%, not hurt the car, and not be breaking the speed limit. So I gotta tell you, this car is just fantastic. I don't know how it's only got 17,000 miles. If this was mine, honestly, I'd probably put 17,000 miles on it in a year. It rides well, surprisingly well for a sports car, surprisingly well with a big leaf spring in the back, but let's face it, I mean, that leaf spring setup, the front of the Ford Model T had that. I didn't mention it's got coil springs in the front, upper and lower control arms, pretty much standard front suspension that really isn't any different than the front suspension on any other General Motors product in the 80s. But I gotta tell you, this is such an incredible car. It's an incredible piece of history. The fact that my friends have things like breweries and wander lodges and Corvettes. I got friends that have boats, commercial fishing boats, motorcycles. We're blessed, and I know that. And what we like to do is we like to bring you along to look at all of this stuff.
Thanks again for watching. Please be sure to like, subscribe, and give us a comment or two below. Next week, we're heading down to Whittier, and you might even get a chance to see what it's like to go through the tunnel.